I think we're live.
Yeah, we
Good
are
morning,
indeed.
Marcus. Good morning, Marcus. Oh, here they come. Diana, Claire, good morning. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes and let more people log on, and then we're going to get started. Morning, Matt. John, Andrew, good morning, Andrew. Right, let's I think majority of people are probably logged on, and if they're not, they will be very shortly. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Defining Moment series. Super excited with this new format. So let me quickly do some housekeeping. On previous webinars, we do comment box for any comment, as you're doing right now. And you can interact with everyone that's in this virtual community. And then you have the question mark for any questions you might want to answer. So normally we do the questions at the end. This series is a different format. So we're going to answer the questions as we go along, but please do put them in the question mark on any questions you might have. We have a packed schedule and attendance on this series. So next week after today, just to give that plug before we get going, is Gianni Scumacci on Monday morning. So this coming Monday, can't really remember the date, but it's at 11 a.m. Then on Wednesday next week at 3:30 p.m. we have Brittany Newby. It's not a Defining Moments series, but it's the 8 step. So Brittany Newby is back in her salon today in Canada. So she's going to bring us up to date what that looks like a week on. And then on Friday, we're back with a Defining Moment series, and we're going to have one of the co-founders of Senses, which is Susan Campbell. So that's what next week is looking like. But today, guys, what better way to start than with the fearless leader and co-founder of Passion for Hair and Feathers Salon Group. We're going to get going with Debbie. So a defining moment is an event which typifies or determines all subsequent related occurrences. And what's a better moment to have this series than at this very moment in time? So let's welcome Debbie into to this webinar. Debbie, can you hear us? Is everything good on your end?
Yeah, everything's good my end. Just the other side of the wall, actually. But
that is correct. I can hear you twice, through the screen and through the wall. That's interesting. So Debbie, we're just going to kick this off, and we have plenty of questions that already been coming into us. But let me ask you this. First of all, how did you come up with this series? What was the moment in time, and why did you come up with it, and how did it happen?
So, like everybody, I guess this week, after the announcement last weekend that we won't be opening until July the 4th at the earliest, I started thinking about how many weeks that was, how we're going to fill our time. Started to think about, like everyone else, I'm listening to webinars, and they seem to have become very much all on, one subject, a subject which, quite frankly, at the end of everything everybody says, they say, but we don't yet know, so we have to wait for government guidance. So I was thinking about how we're going to fill our weeks and how I'm going to fill my week. I was inspired by Neil last Monday. I really enjoyed the creativity. It was fantastic. So I was thinking about all of these things together. Then I was thinking about this event, this whole coronavirus thing, and thinking that it's a defining moment in the world. It's a defining moment in our industry. And for some people that choose it to be, and that is definitely me, it's definitely us, our group of companies, many of the people who are with us, we've already made a decision to come back strong, do some things differently, fix some of the things that we couldn't fix before because we were, in that momentum. Then I was thinking, it's a defining moment for the world. It's a defining moment for our industry. It's a defining moment for our businesses, and it's a defining moment for us. So I started thinking about this. And I thought, lots of people are telling me, about this, but every defining moment that that I've experienced in my life, there's some kind of, like, we'll call it, I mean, Anthony Robbins, you know, he calls it, you know, that moment where, so there has to be that. And so I was thinking about that. Then I thought, do you know what? We're going to spend a couple of weeks, instead of going, you know, focusing on business stuff that we can't implement at the moment anyway. I was particularly thinking about the stylist dialogue webinar that I did, that got phenomenal feedback, but nobody's had the opportunity yet to put it into practice. So, you know, we're going to have to do it again along the way. So I was thinking about all of those things, and then I thought, let's do something inspiring, something, you know, which is a little bit more light-hearted, but touches us at the heart. Something that might just give that trigger to us, that little bit of courage, something that's going to, instead of having us thinking forward with anxiety and worry and not really knowing, let's instead just spend a couple of weeks, because we've got the time, let's spend a couple of weeks just filling ourselves back with, you know, inspiration and more positive things. So I started thinking about that and how we could do it. You know, I started thinking about how do we share success stories, because success leaves clues. And so that's really what we're going to be looking at over the next couple of weeks, as it were. We're going to bring to this series more of that stuff. We've got time for all the other stuff in a couple of weeks, in the run up before we go back. Meanwhile, let's just spend some time together. Let's just hang out, we'll spend some time together. We'll hang out. We'll respond to the audience, right? Because I love how we've got all this going on, you know. Our community are interacting with everybody. It's great. So let's allow the community, ask your questions. We're going to take your questions as you ask them. So this format that we're using this morning is the same format that we'll use as we go along. And yeah, let's just fill our buckets, you know, full of all that good stuff.
I agree with you. It's been a lot of different content, certainly coming from passion for hair, but we do know how noisy it can be out there, and it's nice with a new, refreshing format, if you like. So if you forget about the current situation, if it's at all possible, but just for this moment in time, and what would you say has been some of the defining moments in your career so far? Because we know it's far from over, of course. So what has been some of the defining moments, both as a salon owner, of course, stylist, and of course now having passion for hair? So talk us through some of those defining moments that you can directly pinpoint had true change to the trajectory of your career.
Okay, so there are many. And as people ask questions, they'll come up. But if you're going to ask me to pick one, it's going to be, you know, the defining moment that brought us to where we are today. Because I just want to share what a great privilege it is. It's a great responsibility, but also a great privilege to be able to have to step up to my responsibility in our industry today. So you know, Daniel, because you live with you live with me, and you are doing as I am as well. I mean, frankly, I'm busier than ever right now, but it's because we are. We're working hard to achieve the things that we want to come out of this with. So we're working on new websites, things that we wanted to do, but just didn't seem to be able to get around to in the momentum of stuff. We're working on the Salon Love campaign, these webinars. Daniel and I are doing, with all of our Passion for Hair customers, we're doing one-to-one Zoom calls just to catch up, just to answer any questions that people have got. So we're doing those Zoom calls, and that's been great. All of those things have been great. So I feel very whole right now, because I really feel like I'm being able to use all of the skills and empathy and courage that I have to be able to support people who maybe have got some worries. They are not sure about the uncertainty of the future. They're on their own in their business. There's nothing worse than that feeling that you're an island, right? And nobody else is experiencing what you're experiencing, the uncertainty of the future. So when I think about all of those things, I want to right now talk about the defining moment that brought us to passion for hair. Because it was never an ambition of mine, to have my own distributorship, as it were. That really was kind of a branch on the journey that sort of happened. And we were living in America at the time, and we had realized that whilst America's a great country and Florida's a great place to be, the sun shines, the beaches are beautiful, they're amongst some of the best beaches in the world. We had some fabulous friends, and in fact one of my best friends still today is there in Florida. So all of those things were great, but we missed Europe. We missed the European way, and we one day we were having a conversation at home. I shall never forget it. Me, you, and Declan, and I can't even remember which one of us said it first. One of us said, I really think I'd quite like to go home being England. And then the next one said, I've been feeling and thinking the same thing. And then the next one said, I've been feeling and thinking the same thing. And that was it. Right there and then we made the decision we were going to come back. And it took a while, but going to the defining moment, I remember, Daniel, you and I were talking about when we come back, what will we do? We'd got to find ourselves a new job, right? And so we sat there, and I said to you, well, let's think, what do we do really well? And we were thinking about where we were going to live. And anyway, I'd thought about going back to hairdressing and actually doing hair. Daniel
That's right, I do remember that.
Yeah, and Daniel had worked as a salesperson in the US. There were a couple of organisations that I reached out to who, large organisations, who had previously spoken to me about a job and working for them. One of them, in particular, big organisation, begins with R, ends with S. It's got 5 letters, and I'm so pleased that I didn't make that decision. But we sat down and we said, what are we really good at? And you said, well, I'm good at sales. And I said, well, I launched Paul Mitchell Colour. I did a pretty good job there. Let's see if we can find a hair colour and we can't, launch a hair colour. And that's how it started. And that's been a defining moment, really, to where we are today. And I'm so happy. I mean, I've loved every minute of, my journey throughout my life. Even I appreciate that the bad times are what bring you to the good times as well. That's something you learn as you get older, and you get more secure in your life. That's the other thing, right? But I never forget all of the things, the journeys along the way. So that sort of little mini series of events were a defining moment that set us off on a new journey to where we are today. And I couldn't be happier to be on the journey, that we're on.
Yes, and that particular moment in time and that decision was, as you said, it certainly brought us where we are today. So we do have some questions that I do want to bring in before we go on, and they're probably going to bring you back in time slightly. But Liana is asking, where did your success start? So rather broad question considering your long career in the industry, but if you could help us give a sort of answer to that. Where did your success start? So
it's a really good question, because how I would answer that is that it's been a series of stop starts. That's the truth. And when we think about the S curve, you know, if you know me well and you've done lots of my education, you'll know it's my favorite business tool. It really is. And when I think about my series of S curves, and actually I'm going to use the whiteboard if that's okay, my favorite thing. So I wish I knew how to change that color. I'm fed up with that green. But let me just get the thing. So if I think about, you know, my career, like it's a series of S curves, right? But some of those S curves have been like this, right? And like America would be like that, if you like. You know, we didn't even really sort of get going, and we decided we wanted to come home. And then we started another S curve, and some of them have gone down a little bit like that before I've been able to get the S curve, and some of them have been like that. You understand? So it's been a series of stop starts. What I will tell you is this: to be successful, one of the most important things is you must have resilience. Years ago, they used to have a toy, Wee Balls, right? I don't know if everybody remembers them. They used to say Wee Balls wobble, but they don't fall down, right? They were like these funny little things that little kids had, and you push them over and then they bounce back. Resilience. So you have to have resilience when things are not going your way. You have to say, okay, so I've learned that doesn't work. I'll carry on and I'll find which way works. So that's been one thing, is my resilience, my optimism. You know, I'm always optimistic, and don't get me wrong, I have my dark moments like everybody else does. But I don't, you know, I work hard to try to get myself out of those. And one of the things I would implore everyone to do, we talk about it, but it's really important. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Then that doesn't mean that people that are not like-minded are not precious and special to us anymore, right? It means we compartmentalize. And when it comes to your career, if you want to be really successful in your career, make sure you find the right people, find mentors and role models. And then ask those mentors and role models the kind of questions that we're asking today. And this is exactly what I want to bring to everybody. I want everybody to have the opportunity to listen to people. What you're going to find is that some of the messages are very, very similar all the way along. So I guess it would be finding the right mentors, finding the right people. It would be sticking in there. It would be having the courage to do new things, having the courage to sometimes let go of things that no longer serve their purpose. And that's quite hard. You know, I often joke, and you may have heard me, where I say, I don't like change, because I don't. Nobody does. But what I do understand is that failure to change ultimately will lead, you know, to procrastination and the S curve going down. So it's not one thing, it's a series of things. You're on a good path, Leanna, and you're such a dear, sweet person. You really are. Your career is going in, you know, it's such a great direction. You know, you're a pocket rocket. If you don't know Leanna, she works for Feathers. She's worked with me for about the last, I think it's 16 or 17 years. Yeah, she put 15. Okay, 15 years. And she's quite a small thing. You know, she's not very tall, and she's extremely slim, and tiny little thing she is. She's like a little doll, but she's a pocket rocket. So great question.
It was a great question, and I think, and then one that's been part of any education that certainly you have given us over the last few years, and certainly currently in Passion for Hair, the S-curve is something that we constantly look at and addresses. And so I think anyone in the Passion for Hair team that might be on this webinar will recognize that. So I'm going to jump to another question we had from Kim, also Feathers Kim. She's asking, what made you decide to stop cutting hair behind the chair? So what was the why? How did you make that decision to go from behind the chair to working on the business, so to speak?
Okay, so the final hanging up of my scissors, if you like, wasn't actually my decision. If Elaine's on here, I don't know if Elaine's on here. It's kind of Elaine, really. Because it was a gradual thing. So one of the things we must do is work to our strengths. And I was a great hairdresser, but not because I'm technically a great hairdresser. I'm not. And I've become technically a good color theorist. But technically I wasn't the best hairdresser, but I was really good with clients. And so therefore that made me a successful hairdresser. I listened carefully to them. Anyway, we must work to our strengths. And once I joined 365 and started to learn how to really run the business, and I opened a second salon, and then and I'm sure, so from there, instead of being 5 days on the floor, I was 4 days on the floor. Then I was 3 days on the floor. And then I think I was working 3 days on the floor when I was offered the position to be the director of education by Leslie and Keith, and so it was at that point that I went to 1 day on the floor, because initially I went to work for Leslie and Keith 3 days a week. So I still used to do 1 day on the floor. I think I might have done every other Friday, if I remember right, because I loved hairdressing, right, and I loved being on the salon floor. Anyway, what happened was when I went into the salon to do my clients, because it was, by that time, it was more like it was a, how can I describe what it was like? Fabulous. But I mean, it wasn't my main job, right? So I would go in, and I loved doing my clients, and I'd get behind, I'd have all the assistants, come over here, watch this, can you imagine me in the salon? I mean, it was so disruptive, and everybody else is, doing their normal Friday, lots of clients trying to get on with it, and there was I was a little bit disruptive in the salon, is the truth. So, not negatively disruptive, in a positive way. And eventually, Elaine said, I really don't think that this is working very well. So, may I suggest that it's time to hang up your scissors? So I did. So that's what happened. That's how I hung up my scissors. It was a gradual thing. So there was no defining moment that stopped me from doing hair. And I miss it. But these days, I mean, I've not done hair for years, and you may notice that Daniel's hair is a little bit long right now, and the clippers have been here for weeks, and we've been talking about it. And what happens is this: he says, "Will you cut my hair today?" And I say, "Well, you were too. So, will you cut my hair?" I say, "Yeah," and then I lose my confidence. Anyway, I did say to Daniel this morning, he was doing his hair, and I said, "Oh, I'll cut your hair later for you if you want." He said, "No, at this stage, let's just wait." So anyway, that's my hairdressing. But my skills have taken me on a different path, and everybody should work to their skills, their strengths. Work to your strengths.
Yeah, you often get this question, and I know it was very popular at one moment in time for, should I call it, coaches and educators, whatever you want to call it, who used to almost always try to say that you have to work yourself from behind the chair and working on the business. And I know you have some views on that before we go on to the next question. Maybe you can just touch on that idea that you don't have to necessarily go from behind the chair just to work on your business. There is a happy medium, and certainly maybe in the last few years, the answer is not always going stepping away from the salon floor, so to speak. So you share a bit about your views on that, because I know you get this question a lot.
Okay, yeah, I will, because sometimes I watch webinars or listen to podcasts, or I might be even in a conference and I hear people talking to salon owners who maybe have only had their business a couple of years, and they're saying you need to work on the business and not in the business. And one of the problems with that is that when a salon owner's not behind the chair, they're not generating the income. So what that means is other hairstylists have now got to generate the income to pay themselves, generate the income that from that one person needs to be generated to support the business. So that would be the non-income producing people, the apprentices, the reception, then cover all the overheads, and then there's got to be income to pay the salon owner who's now not behind the chair, and then after all that there's got to be a little bit of profit left. Now let me tell you that 30 years ago it was much easier, and the reason why it was easier is because we didn't have the working time directive. We didn't have 28 days holiday to pay. In fact, when I first opened my salon over 30 years ago now, actually it's 31 years the end of this month. I opened on the Tuesday after the second bank holiday of May, and I gave all my team 2 weeks paid holiday, and that in those days that was considered really generous. Now the other thing was we didn't pay the average of the last 12 weeks, and that too has changed. It's now the average of the last year. That changed on April the 1st. So the average of the last 12, we didn't do that. We just paid people their basic. And so a hairstylist might be really, really busy and earning, £200 a week in in commission. We're talking, 30 years ago, but their basic might be £80, and that's what they got when they went on holiday. We didn't, the employer's NI wasn't as high. We didn't, of course, have pension contributions to pay. I feel like there's something else. And so it was easier then. The profit margins were higher back then. So it was easier for somebody to come away from the chair. So if somebody does want to, if right now your business relies on your turnover, salon owners, that's okay. But if you feel overwhelmed about how you manage the business, and if you've got ambitions for growth, then you need a plan. And that plan includes, for an example, you might need, when you get to 5 stylists, you can go down to 3 days yourself. When you get 7 stylists, you can go down to 2 days. When you get 10 stylists, then you could come away to manage the business. But you can only do it once somebody else is supplementing that income. Yeah. I do feel strongly about that, because I often see people salon owners coming away from behind the chair without understanding the full financial implication of that. And what happens is, at the end of the day, it affects them financially.
Absolutely. It's far more complicated than just stepping aside, maybe adding 1 or 2. So it's a great answer. I'm going to jump to the next question. We have one from Leanne Potts, and she's asking, how would you measure success? What's your definition of success?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's different for everybody, and it really is. For me, I'm extremely competitive, and I only actually realised probably about 10 years ago that I'm ambitious. Before that, I used to say, no, I'm not ambitious, and I don't know why I didn't think I was. But so for me, because I've been ambitious and I'm competitive, for me, success has been about growth. So for the last 30 years, success for me has been about moving forward and growing and getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it's just how it's been for me. And there have been times, of course, where I've not necessarily been on a growth curve. And in many respects, in fact, my dad sent me a message last week, and he said to me, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He didn't just say, are you okay? He's asking, like, is your business going to be okay? And etc., etc. He lives in Spain, my dad. And I messaged him back. We do talk, but this particular one, it was a message. And I messaged him back and I said, Dad, you know me. I'm actually really good in, you know, when the tough get, you know, they say when the tough gets going, the going get tough. I'm really good when at stepping up when things get tough. That sense of alert, that sense of urgency, if you like, is something that I really respond to. I don't know why, I just do.
Yeah, well, I certainly would agree on that, and I think one of the few people we listen to at times is, of course, Gary Vee, and he often says that it's easy to be a wartime general in peace, and you know, when it gets tough like it is now, it's certainly a moment in time where you step up with your experience and support, and
Yeah,
I'm sure it's.
Yeah, Daniel, you've just reminded me of
This.
something that I want to share with everybody. And you may have heard me say, I say this a lot. It's not what you do in your business in the good times that makes your business great. It's what you do in your business in the bad times. Because when your business is going great, it's going great. And sometimes it can go great, like because the momentum is going great, you see. So it's what you do in your business. And I guess that's one of the things, you know, that made me think about this Defining Moments series, where I want people to be able to make notes, not about, you know, business, more about things about themselves, you know, because at the end of the day, ultimately, you can do all the things in the world, all the business strategies and underpinning philosophies that you like. At the end of the day, it comes down to the individual and the person.
Absolutely. We're going to take the next question. We're going to take you back to time in America. So Andrew Slater is asking, how did you keep control of your 5 salons whilst you were in America?
Gosh, I promised myself this morning I was going to be really honest with you, even if it was uncomfortable. And then it reminded me of those of you that were at Business Counts. Do you remember I did 5 or 6 things I'm going to tell you about? I don't really want to tell you about myself. So it reminded me of that this morning. Okay, so when my salons actually were running without me before we went to America, because I originally went to work for Keith and Leslie 3 days a week, and I went to work as director of education for 365. And then when Paul Mitchell launched a colour, Leslie called me into his office and he said to me, "You're the only hairdresser on payroll. We're about to launch a colour. We need your help." And so initially I was involved in the research and development for the UK and the European market. And if I do say so myself, I did such a good job, and I did. I produced an absolutely amazing dossier and plan for it. Some people that here may even have been involved with me in the original researching of it. But anyway, eventually Leslie made me the brand manager of Paul Mitchell Colour. So then he made me director of education for Salon Success. So I was then in charge of the education, not only for 365, which of course was the business education. I was also in charge of the education for Paul Mitchell and all of the programs that we brought around at that time that came along after that. So by the time I was working 5 days a week, we had moved from Essex, and in fact were living just outside of Aylesbury. So before I went to America, I was not involved in the day-to-day running of my salons, and it was going great. So how was that? Well, it's really about having great managers, great people who are really committed to what they're doing. You have to have good systems in place. You must, of course, keep your eye on the numbers, because the numbers tell the story. Numbers don't lie. So you've got to be good at your numbers. You've got to be disciplined in picking those numbers up and analysing what they're telling you. You've got to have great people. It was Feather's 30th birthday last year, and to celebrate, I took my managers and partners to on retreat to France, and we actually we took the opportunity. Of course, we celebrated, but we also took the opportunity to plan ahead for the next 10 years, and start really thinking about what that did. And the overriding message that I gave them was, do it for the brand. Right? Feathers as a brand is 30 years old. It's a very, very strong brand. And I said to them, don't do it for me. Don't do it for yourself. Do it for the brand, to keep the brand, alive and where it is. So it's how did I do it? Because at the moment, of course, I live 100 miles away from my salons. And in fact, I'm having meetings with my managers. We have a meeting all together at least once a week, but I'm having individually conversations with them all. They're having to go in and, do the changes that we're having to make in the salons, and the cleaning and the decorating. And I can't go over there. Even if I wanted to, I can't go 100 miles. I'm not supposed to be doing that, and I wouldn't do it. It'd be irresponsible. So it's really about having people that are emotionally invested. Of course, they're financially invested, but the emotional investment's more important. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. It's a great answer with the emotional investment in a business, and certainly from team members, which really leads me on to the next question really nicely. Is actually by Milka from Passion for Hair. She's asking you, how have you succeeded to maintain such respect, trust, and regard from everyone in the industry? For all this time, from what I can see, everyone comes to you for advice and help. And Milka, I would agree with you. So just to shorten that down, why do you think that you get such a high number of people in the industry who is seeking advice from you? And just to clarify, I'm talking about people outside of the Passion for Hair network as well. What would you say? Why do you think that is?
Initially, one word, and it's integrity. And if I do say so myself, my integrity is one of the most important. It's one of the most valuable things to me, and that's not always been that way. It's something that I've learned. So yeah, my integrity is very important. I came to realize, it was really Leslie that taught me that thing about integrity is that when you don't, or you can't keep your integrity, at the end of the day, you lay your head on the pillow, and you might be able to fool other people, but you can't fool yourself. And it really resonated. That was a defining moment when Leslie taught me that, because it really resonated with me, because it made me think about all the times when maybe I'd not been as integral as I should or could have been. And and that is what happens, is it plays on you. Now, let me tell you something about integrity. Every time my integrity has been tested, it has cost me something. So it's cost me a friend, or a team member, or it's cost me money, or it's cost me emotion or time. So every time your integrity is tested, it costs you something. And I remember Leslie teaching. It was actually a different lesson, but it correlates with integrity. There you go. Carly's put it right there. Be rich enough to be able to keep your integrity, and also be prepared to know that it's going to cost you something, and so you've got to give something up, right? So Leslie taught me to be rich enough to be able to keep your integrity when it's tested. Leslie was such a great teacher when it came to things with money. Maybe another thing will come up in a minute that Leslie taught me about money. I'm sure it will. But yeah, I think integrity. And then, of course, there is the knowledge. You see, the trust comes from the integrity. But, the knowledge, the experience. And when it comes to experience, I've been an apprentice, I've been a stylist, I've been a salon owner, I've been a chain salon owner, I've been an educator, I've been an executive in a director and an executive in a corporate company. I've worked all over the world. So I'm so blessed to have had all of those experiences. You know, I'm in distribution. I know I've not been in manufacturing, but I know quite a bit about manufacturing because we work with independent manufacturers. It means that they share, and so we learn from those things. So there really isn't very much. And Andrew's put, I'm a novelist. Yeah, there isn't really very much that I haven't poked my nose in our industry, and I'm prepared to share that. I'm not afraid to share it. In fact, somebody asked me, I think she might be here. You know, I'm a very sharing person. Somebody, we were having a conversation about it's actually you know, I'll share. It's somebody that wants to open a passion for hair. So a recommendation that somebody made. Somebody who wants to open a passion for hair account, and they are on the doorstep of one of my salons. And she said, will that be all right? And I said, yes, of course it would be. I'm not afraid to share with people. I'm not afraid of competition. I always say to my team, you know, you just always aim to do it bigger and better. And if you always aim to do it bigger and better, you don't have to worry about the competition, because they might come second, but they won't come first. You see? Let me give you an example. And again, it was Leslie that taught this. Some of you may remember Ray Day. Does anyone remember Ray Day? And Daniel, if I start getting boring, like, interrupt me and say, let's move on to the next question. Anyone here remember Ray Day? So Ray Day was a salon owner. Owned a salon called Silhouette de Barry in Braintree. And he was a 365 member before I was, right? And so I was about to join 365, and Ray wasn't. Kay, you worked for Ray at one point. Ray wasn't very happy, right, about me becoming a 365 member, because he said it's my club, you know, and he'd got this edge, you know, in our area, in his salon, and I was about to learn what the edge was. And in those days, you know, things that you did and you learned in 365 really did give you the edge, right? So today, you know, the information is so easy for everybody to get, and everyone's doing it, you know, so it's all a little bit flatter, and it's more difficult to really stand out from the crowd. So anyway, Ray really wasn't very happy about this. I could tell you some lovely stories. We came to be great friends, and we're still in touch today. In fact, just last week we had a couple of messages backwards and forwards, so we're still great friends today. He's retired now. And Leslie said, oh, that's someone calling me, sorry. And now I've got an echo. Why would I have an echo like that?
I think you might need to hang up your phone.
Can you all hear me still?
That's good. That's good.
Okay. So it will mean I won't be able to hear you, Daniel. I'll have to listen to you through the wall. Okay, so
Ray Day, bring it back to the story about Ray Day.
Yeah. So Leslie got us both in a room, and he said, how many people live in Braintree? And at the time, I can remember, because I'll never forget it. It was around 36,000 people. He said 36,000 people, and he turned around and he said to Ray, he said, you can't do 36,000 people, and neither can she. So between the two of you, you could work together, you could become friendly competition, and you could wipe the town clean of the rest of them. And that's what we did. We worked together, so we were friendly competition, and we were competition. Clients used to go from one to the other, you know, and but we did. I mean, we literally dominated that town back then. There was no one else but Feathers or Silhouette de Barry, and Stansted Airport grew, and so therefore that area grew, and it was fantastic. Yeah, good days.
Yeah, I've heard some of your stories with Ray Day, and they're all quite funny, actually. Just going back to the original question, I think, in terms of, I always remember how when Don Bewley was with us, the way you two used to connect, because although you are currently in distribution, you are still a salon owner, and that connection point you have by being you used to be an apprentice, you've been a salon stylist, sorry, you've been a manager, you've been a salon owner, you are a salon owner. I think what I see close up is those connection points you have within our industry. You do just as well on the salon floor with a stylist and a team as you do in an executive boardroom with manufacturers. And I think, slightly biased, but I think it's unique, and I think it's excellent, and I think we're all very blessed to have that expertise and have it so available to us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to say, of course, meeting Don was another defining moment in my life and in my business, because you know, Don Bewley was such an integral person, but I had never met anybody that was so dedicated to the hairstylist as Don. And my commitment and dedication to hairstylists today grew from Don. That's one of the things I learned from Don.
He was truly remarkable, and certainly had an impact on us as individuals, but our business as well. Which leads me to the next question of Matt, who I know was a big fan of Don Bewley. He's asking, after everything you have achieved to this point in your life, what have you got planned for the next 10 years?
Okay, so what have I got planned for the next 10 years? Well, I already told you that, you know, I did a 10-year retreat with Feathers for our 30th anniversary. For the next 10 years, but in 10 years' time, I will be 68 years old. I still intend to be working. So, but of course, I do have to take into consideration that as you get to these, you know, these years, I might not be able to, I mean, I might, but I might not be able to have, you know, the same amount of energy that I've got now. So over the next 10 years, I want to pass Feathers over to the team. I'm very keen to find the right path to do that. Previously, and in being honest, I have you know, loosened the reins of that business. And what happened was, in the last recession, the business didn't do as well as it could and should have done, and I had to go in, and I had to take the reins of that business again, and I had to pull it back round. So when I tell you, you know, that in my life, in my business life, I've been bankrupt nearly 3 times. I don't exaggerate with you. The last one was about, where are we? Yeah, it's coming up about 10 years ago. So, I want to hand that business over. I want that brand to continue. I want hairstylists to be able to benefit from that business in the future in the same way as they have in the past. And I want to pay back to people who have given large, you know, periods of their life to that business. So that's the plan for Feathers. You know, where we have kind of an employee type or a management type program. That's what I want to do there. For Passion for Hair, I'm so proud with what we've achieved so far, but we've got you know, so many plans for Passion for Hair for the future. We'll never let go of our current philosophies, so we'll always be independently owned for the independent salon and stylist, working with independent manufacturers, bringing the best products and strategies and ideas and Passion for Hair continues to grow and grow, and I'm so proud of that. You know, we've opened 6 new accounts, and when I say new accounts, you know, we open quite a lot of smaller accounts, online accounts of people that buy, you know, smaller things. So for an example, Colour Start. But I'm talking about relationships that we are building literally, you know, virtually currently, and we've been able to do that through this process. And that makes me, of course, it makes me happy that our business is growing, but it makes me so happy that even in adversity, what we stand for in Passion for Hair and what we want to do, people are gravitating to, because this is a community for me. Of course, the business is important. You know, we have to eat. We have to pay our mortgage. It's a business, right? But it's a community. And that's really important to me. So in the next 10 years, what you'll see from us at Passion for Hair, you know, you'll see us growing, but you'll see you know, us growing the community. And I want to find ways to strengthen the community. I feel that our Passion for Hair family has been strengthened through this situation. You know, so finding those threads and how we do that, that's what the next 10 years will hold. And I'm not retiring.
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting 10 years ahead, and it truly has been a great response on all the webinars we've done so far, and it's been various topics, and it seems to me when we sit in these webinars, we look at the comments, we get messages afterwards, that absolutely the community has grown much stronger and connected in a way that maybe even the educations we did pre-lockdown face-to-face did not necessarily sort of facilitate. We've got a question here from Helen, which I think is very apt, considering that you, Debbie, bring so much inspiration to a lot of us in our network. She's asking you, who do you or have you looked for when it comes to inspiration in hairdressing and in business?
Okay, so there's a few people. Let me try and I guess the first person that ever really caught my inspiration, of course, was Leslie. I remember the first time I met Leslie, I was at 365 Insight, and he had a chair in the middle of we were sat in a U shape, and he had a chair in the middle of the U shape, and he put his foot on the chair, and he leaned on it like that, and he went, "I'm gay, I'm a millionaire, and I can't remember what the third thing was, but that's what he said. He said, which one's not true?" And I looked at him and I thought, God, well, he don't look gay. But he caught my attention. I was like, you know, Leslie has been one of the biggest inspirations to me. Don Bewley, massive inspiration to me. Keith Chandler, who was my biggest fan and yet my biggest critic. I mean, there were times that man was so brutally critical of me. You know, like when you're a teenager and you hate your parents, you know, I had those emotions with him, but it was always because he wanted me, you know, to learn the lesson and to elevate. From a hairdressing point of view, I mean, today, from a hairdressing point of view, I like, you know, Neil, phenomenal, Jude, phenomenal, Luigi Martini, phenomenal. Let me just try and think. I love Patrick Cameron because he is so he's such a down-to-earth and just beautiful person. So that's from hairdressing. Outside of hairdressing, Peter Sage is a huge mentor to me. he's he's an extremely fabulous strategic person. So he's a great mentor to me. Peter Sage. Gary V, I really like Gary V. I love his rawness. I love his honesty. There's so much bullshit out there. It just drives me nuts. And you get to a point in your life where you can see through it. And the reason why you can see through it is because in the past, you've listened to the bullshit and you've tried it, right? And you've wasted your time or your money. So,
how do you find, if you look at Passion for Hair and our network of manufacturers and distributors, something that I always find very fascinating and inspiring is that if you look at Census with, of course, Susan and Julia being two the founders of that company, and of course with E04 it was always Don and Beth, and now it's under the leadership of Beth. How do you find that connection point and relationship with being women at that level doing business? I always find that being really interesting, that our network is so full of powerful women in the industry, which is not necessarily the case if you look across the board. How do you find that from an inspiration point of view and energy?
So let me just, I've thought about this a lot. How come in the independent sector there are so many women? And let me tell you, it's because the women, it's quite difficult for the women to penetrate the corporate side. I don't know what to say, but in the independent sector, yes, you do seem to find this. It's incredible. When I look at Susan and Julia and I listen to their story, and we're going to have Susan on next Friday. When Susan tells the story of when they first started and they used to sit there and physically put the tubes in the box and the instructions in the box. And when they started the company and the first, order went off. And then you look at the company today, they're doing business in over 100 companies today. And in fact, just this week, Daniel, as you know, I've been helping them to set up a new distributor in Israel. Right, yes. It's quite incredible. And I look at those, I look at Susan and Julia, I think, wow, how have you done it? When we can ask Susan some of those things next week. And then Beth, I've got so much respect for Beth. She and Don were just such a happy couple. Daniel and I were so lucky. We've holidayed with Don and Beth. We know them professionally. They're just amazing. So they were with each other 24/7. So when Don passed, there was the concern for, oh gosh, what will happen with E04 and da-da-da. Of course there was that, but the concern for Beth, the strength I have seen in that woman can make me cry just sitting here thinking about it. I remember the first distributor meeting that Daniel and I went to after Don's passing. And some of those, distributors, they're not as close, maybe as, they're business people at the end of the day. And they were...
They can be an intimidating group, I think is a good summary. Would that be fair to say?
Sorry,
they can be a rather intimidating group. They're all nice people, but they can be very intimidating.
Yeah. Let me tell you, some of the E04 distributors in the US are some of the biggest distributors in the world, right? So it was an intimidating room. And I saw that woman, she stood up there and she stood her ground and she bloody told them straight. I was so proud. Tears rolled down my cheeks as she was speaking. I could cry now telling you about it. Told her afterwards, said, Beth, you are one hell of a woman. So when I said earlier about surrounding yourself with the right people, this is what's important, because these things happen in our lives. And if you've got the right people around you, you can lean on those people and You can get the support, the inspiration. Courage comes from inspiration. When you're inspired, you get courage. When you've got courage, you know, you can move forward and you can make change. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. So, yeah, so I hope I've not missed anybody there. Don, Beth, I mean, and there are some other people, you know. He's retired now, but lawyer that I used to work with. Again, some of you here may have met him. Johnny Back, wonderful, wonderful man, and I learnt so much from him. So, you know, it's also always be open to learning. Ask yourself, in every situation you're in, ask yourself quietly in your head, what am I learning here? What am I learning here? What am I learning here? These days I have to write these things down, you know, when something comes, and I have to write it down. But every experience that you're going through in your life, you're learning something. Yeah, Leanna said there, Gianni. Yeah, I nearly forgot Gianni. I love Gianni. He's you see, because his heart is with the stylist.
Yeah, his
Gianni's
pure
heart
heart
is with the stylist. I love him. Monday.
I'm sure you can probably remember a handful of more people, but with time in mind, and if you come up with these, maybe you make a post, because we're going to crack on with some questions. We get back to Leanne. She's asking, was there ever a moment when you thought, I am successful, where you sort of almost declared it and realized that now I am successful?
Gosh. Was there ever a moment where I felt I am successful? There have been celebratory moments, of course. I can remember when I did the deal with Census. It was in Milan. And I can remember going to the Duomo in Milan. It's a beautiful cathedral. And sitting there with a bottle of wine, really feeling like the cat that had got the cream, you know, because I so wanted that contract with Census. So that was a success. But my personal success, at what point did I feel my personal success? I don't know. I'll have to come back to it. I can't think of the defining moment, but I'm sure there was one, but I can't think of it. So I'll have to come back to that one.
And I'm sure you will. So let's move on. Anna has a question here. As a business owner, if the salon needs your column income and you are fully booked, what's the best way to manage standards and make sure stylists are performing to required levels?
So the first and simple answer is you must have a system. That's what the 8 essential steps brings us, the system. Then you must hold people accountable. And we did talk about this actually on a webinar way in the beginning. You must hold people accountable, and you must have the ability to be able to hold people accountable in the moment. And that's not always easy when you're, when you're on the salon floor behind a chair because you're with a client and you see something, and really you want to either scream out, "Oi, what are you doing?" Or, you know, you want to be able to leave what you're doing and going over there and intercept. But neither of those things are very compatible with giving a great service from behind the chair. So it is, but what makes it easier is when people are committed to that themselves. In other words, they believe and that you know, this is how I want to be successful. This is how I am going to be successful, or am successful. This is what I'm going to do. So it's having the system, it's having the right people committed, and it's having people to be accountable. when they're not playing their part, when they're not doing what they should be doing. And that's I hope that's answered that. And put my hands here so Declan can see that is not me that is making that question mode going on and off.
And it's not me. I'm not sure. That'd be interesting to find out what that actually is. But let's move on. And you sort of answered this question, but Kim has, and maybe she didn't realize it would come up, but she's asking who has been your biggest influence. We said of all the people that you have mentioned thus far, has there been... would you pick one person who has been the biggest influence, or would that not be fair or suitable?
I have to pick one. Okay, it's quite hard because all of those people I mentioned, it's been different in different ways and different in different parts of my career. But if I had to pick one, it would be Leslie, because before I met Leslie, I knew nothing about business, nothing. I was a hairdresser who I'd had that entrepreneurial seizure, and I had the opportunity to start a business. That's all I was. And if I'd not met Leslie, I would never have, or maybe I would have done, I don't know. But it was Leslie, meeting Leslie, that really got me on that path of understanding and learning about business. And that's so it would have to be that. But like I say, I feel a little bit unfaithful to others because I worked alongside Keith Chandler for a lot of years. We were business partners, and I learned so much of what I know from Keith as well. And then, as I say, that when I met Don, learning that aspect of making the connections with the stylist, I learned that from Don. Before then, that was not. My connections were all about focusing on salon owners and business systems and things like that. So that connection with stylists came from Don. So Leslie would have to be the first, but I do feel unfaithful, not giving credit to those others that really shaped, my hairdressing life and who I am today.
Well, they on their own have served their part at their moment in time, I guess, when you look at your journey overall. Milka is back with a question, and she's asking, and I think I might know the answer to this one, but I will leave it to you, and I'm going to write it down to make sure I'm correct. She's asking, what's the hardest decision you have ever had to make? It's probably been a few, but if you...
the hardest decision I ever had to make.
Pick one in context of business, maybe to
Sorry, what did you say, Daniel?
Just put it in the context of maybe your business life, if you like, or what the hardest decision has been.
There are two, really, decisions that have been difficult. One, of course, was leaving Salon Success, because I left Salon Success because I was not in the place that I felt I was supposed to be. So I'll tell you the defining moment. I was in the boardroom, and for those of you that know Salon Success, at this point, the boardroom was Leslie's old office. And you may remember if you ever came there, you'll remember there was a big oak table, the boardroom. We all sat round there. We were having a meeting about, it was a launch for something, I can't remember what it was. Legal, education, marketing, PR, accounts, logistics. We were all there in this meeting, and we were talking about this particular launch, and everyone was talking about, the part they would play. So someone would say, well, this is the budget, and someone would say, well, and I'd say, well, this is the education program. Someone would say, well, this is how it will come in and go out. Someone would say, well, this is how we will promote it to the magazines. You understand? And everyone's there and da-da-da. anyway, and they were talking about the marketing strategy, and I was sat there, and I said, okay, I have a question. If I'm Sally, the stylist, in a salon on the high street, how does that work for me? And everyone looked at me like I had landed off another planet. Like, what? You know, and at that moment, and I'd had feelings about it, but at that moment, I knew I was in the wrong place. But it was a hard decision. And the reason why, by the way, I was employee number 18,236. I was born to be number one. So that had worried me for a while. But anyway, that was the defining moment. And at that point, I thought, I'm in the wrong place. I'm not supposed to be here. My place in hairdressing is not in this corporate world. And what made it difficult was it was a very comfortable place to be. Okay, so I had a fabulous salary, expense account, company car. You know, at that time I was working in Australia, America, so I was traveling. I had a very, very comfortable and cushioned life at that time. But I took the leap, and I'm so glad that I did. So that was a difficult one. Yeah, that was a difficult decision, but it was one that I was really, really pleased to make. And then, of course, there was one other very, very difficult decision, and that was to part company. If I, you know, didn't say that out loud, then there would be some people that would know. But you know, to part company with the managing director at Feathers about 10 years ago, that was a very, very difficult decision, and it was a very difficult time in my life. But my integrity, you know, I had to. Well, there's two things. One was my integrity, but the other thing was the business was in trouble. Is the truth? The business is in trouble. We were. Karen, who's the accountant still today of my group of companies, she said to me, Debbie, we've got 3 months left. And after 3 months, we've got nowhere to go financially. So we were 3 months from the bankruptcy.
That was a defining moment.
Yeah, Perry said it was, but look where we are now. Absolutely. I can remember saying, come on, girls, we're coming back. Right? So, yeah. So that's the answer to that one, I hope.
Okay, I was wrong. It's not the toughest decision you have to make that I thought, but I will leave what I thought for later. Milk is also asking you, what would be the best advice you can give?
The best advice I could give. The best advice I could give would be to have a vision, set goals. So have a vision, of course, will be long-term, and then set goals. And know that if you don't reach those goals along the way, it's okay as long as you're going in the right direction. And if you're not going in the right direction, it means that you haven't yet got all the right information. So then you have to start looking and seeking for the right information. But you know, whatever it is that you want to do, like, it's hard work along the way. I have a little saying, I invented it for Declan when he was a tiny, tiny child. And I used to say to Declan, and I made myself a promise I would never say no to Declan. He was a difficult child. He was stubborn. And I don't know where he gets it from. But tongue in cheek. I made a decision that I wouldn't say no. When you said no to Declan, same as saying no to me, it was like a red rag to a bull, right? So I thought it's no good saying no to him. What I have to do is I have to always give him choices. And then if he makes the wrong choice, I have to say, is that taking you nearer or further away from where you want to be? Right? So I used to say, okay, so you can do this or you can do that. And he said, well, I want to do that. Well, is that taking you nearer or further away from where you want to be? So sometimes I see this a lot. People say they want this, right? But then they do that, you know? And I look and I think, is that taking you nearer or further away from where you want to be? Because you say you want that, but you're doing that. So is it taking you nearer or further away from where you want to be? And some you go, oh, but that's the easy road and that's the hard road. And that's the problem, is that often people take the easy route instead of the hard one, and it's taking them away from what their vision is, their long-term vision. Maria says, I remember you teaching me this for my children. I still use that sentence with them. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's great advice. It's been some comments I haven't really been updating you with. Maybe you have seen them yourself because I've been focusing on the questions. But I did see a comment here from Marcus that David always says that you were the one that went away from 365 and implementing everything. And I think if we look at the network of people and some of the ones that you have mentioned, I always think that has been such a fundamental heads up that it's not just about learning, it is about putting it in place and implementing it if it is in your business or for self-development. And I thought it was an interesting a comment by David, and I think we can see it in our network. We can see it through education, who is implementing what. So thank you for that, Marcus, or should I say David. And we do have a question from Carly. She's asking, how did you maintain your success after having a baby and becoming a single parent?
Really good question.
It's a good question.
And again, part of the answer is that it was a little bit easier back then than it is today. And I do look at young mums today and I see how tough it is for them. Firstly, back, Declan's, how old is Declan? 27. So back then, 27 years ago, people weren't quite as judgmental about, mums leaving children. So don't get me wrong, I did feel that guilt from time to time in leaving him, but it wasn't through peer pressure. It was through the sheer guilt of, when I went through a period of my life where when I was at work, I felt like I should be at home. And when I was at home, I felt like I should be at work. And I managed to sort that out for myself at some point. And that was the point at which I made the concept of win, right? Who can tell me what win is? I've taught lots of you this. Win.
Go, Matt,
see if someone comes up with it. Yeah, what's important now? So I came up with the concept of what's important now, win. And I would say what's important right now, I'm at work, and what's most important is that I concentrate on what's happening here, not worrying about what's happening at home. And when I was at home, I'd be, what's important now? The most important thing is spending time with Declan, quality time, whatever it was. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, and again, I'm going to be honest, I was very fortunate. I had au pairs. Declan went to nursery. So we had an au pair. He went to nursery, and I had tremendous support from my parents, right? So, and I always used to joke, and I used to say it always used to take 3 people to look after Declan, I always used to joke about that, because when I travelled, I often travelled with my au pairs, and some of you that have known me a long time and knew Declan when he was a youngster would have met some of our au pairs, right? So having that support, is important. Being able to understand the win, the what's important now. And here's the other thing, you've got to make sacrifices. And boy, through the years, I made some sacrifices, and so did Declan. Declan went to boarding school, which I didn't force him into boarding school. It was something that happened organically. I was very fortunate that I sent him, he went to private school, and the private school that he went to had boarding, and he started with flexi boarding, and he loved it so much, he wanted to be a full-time boarder. So he made the decision by himself, actually, but it made it much easier from a career point of view. but from a mum point of view, it was tough. It was very tough, but you know, I was a one-parent family, and I had to make the money, you know, and so I just muddled along as far as being a mum was concerned. So I did my best, and I wouldn't change any of it for the world now, because I've been, you know, very fortunate to be able to help Declan in his adult life. And of course, now he works in the company and he's doing extremely well. He's many of you you know, work with Declan, and he does all of our digital stuff and our websites and all of that kind of stuff. And so I feel so blessed and lucky to be able to work with him. He probably wouldn't say the same about me. But, you know, so what we missed back then, we've got now, because we see each other every day and we work together. And I've been very fortunate in being able to help him, you know, and his family. That's a great privilege for a parent to be able to do that. And it's really only because of the sacrifices that he and I made when he was a child. And I do say that to him sometimes, you know. I say, you made the sacrifices when you were a child, and here's the payback for that now.
Absolutely. And on the topic of tough decision and Declan and defining moments, and in the spirit of this series, why don't I bring this to you, and maybe you can share with the group that moment where you had to let Declan go from Passion for Hair.
Gosh, was that the one that you were saying the most difficult thing I'd ever done?
Well, I thought it was going to be one of the two, yes.
Oh, okay.
I thought it would be,
so,
yeah.
When we first came back from it, okay, so when we were in America, Declan did a degree in culinary arts. That's what they call it in America. And so when we came back to England, he went into chefing, and he was a chef. And you may or may not know that Daniel was a chef when I first met him. So Declan was a chef, and he was doing really, really good. But then he discovered girls, and he didn't like the hours very much. So not only girls, you know, he discovered friends and girls, and he realised that chefing was very unreasonable hours, and etc., etc. So he didn't want to do that anymore, and he came to work for us at Passion for Hair. And when he first came to work for us, it was not easy. I mean, I'm trying to remember how old he was at the time.
I don't know, maybe he can type it in the thing.
Remember him making us lunch for the first E01 meetings. That's right, he did, yeah. He was, yeah, so he's about 18. Okay, he's 18 or 19. So, yeah, he was still a teenager, really. And at times he was a little bit disrespectful, speaking to me in ways that it was not, you know, it wasn't helpful in the workplace for him to be speaking to me like that. There's only one person in the world that knows how to push my buttons, and that's Declan. Even Daniel can't push my buttons. Declan can, right? Declan knows exactly how to push my buttons, right? And anyway, so we would have these things going on, and it was really getting out of hand. And so, to cut a long story short, one day I told Declan that I really thought it would be a good idea if he went and worked for somebody else, went and found a job and worked for somebody else. And it was heartbreaking for me on the inside, but on the outside, I knew it was the right thing. And I said to him, you need to go and work for somebody else. And actually, I said to him, you need to go and work for somebody else. And then I carried on. And he said to me, you're joking. I said, Declan, I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I said, this isn't it forever. I'm hoping that you'll go somewhere else. You'll learn what it's like to work for somebody else. You'll get some skills and whatever. And then my dearest wish is that you'll come back. Anyway, so off he went. Declan, I hope we see you in this series. Off he went, and Sharon, I'm going to tell everybody in a minute something I got from you. Anyway, so off he went, and he wanted to get into sales. So he went to work in telesales. The first job, if I remember rightly, Declan will correct me if not, I think he was selling electricity or something, telesales. Then he was doing selling aids to retired people. That was telesales. And then he got a job in telesales selling comms, communications, so internet and telephones to businesses. And he did really, really well in this business. He loved his bosses. They were young, dynamic. They were all in this office in Milton Keynes. They were killing it. And Declan, he did smash it. He was like employee of the month. He won televisions, whatever. Anyway, meanwhile, passion for hair was growing, and Daniel and I needed somebody that could, start doing marketing and, all this kind of internet stuff, And I said to Daniel, it would be perfect for this job, don't you? I said, Declan. And so we approached Declan. He was like Wolf of Wall Street. He had a desk, and 6 people would be around the desk, and he would be at the top of the desk, and his job would be to listen into everyone else's calls and then coach them on how they do it, etc., etc. Anyway, so we went to him. We said, Declan, we're looking for someone. We think it's a job that'd be perfect for you. We started telling him about the job, and then he said, Mum, I don't just earn the minimum wage these days, He said, I'm only coming if you can match my wage. Anyway, and he's never looked back, and neither have we. And I'm so proud of him. And it was a very, very tough thing to do, but it was a good thing to do, because I remember when he went to give his notice in to his boss said to him, he said, because I think he told his boss, his boss said, oh, you've had all these jobs, and he told his boss that my mum owns this company, but my mum said, I'm going to get some experience, and then long term, because I think his boss said, what do you want to do in 5 years, Anyway, when he went to give his notice in, he said to him, I'm sorry to see you go, Declan. He said, but I'm ever so proud. He said, because you said to me that you were out in the world getting some experience so that one day you could go and work in your mum's company. He said, and it's me that's give you that experience. Yeah, so anyway, so that's good. Sharon, I'm going to tell you another story, everyone, while we're on the subject of Declan. And maybe this is a defining moment for Declan. So Sharon had told me, her children are a bit older than mine. One of them's probably on here. Sharon had told me that what she used to do is when they've slammed the doors in the house, she'd make them take the doors off so they couldn't slam the door, you see. So Declan was going through the period in his life, of slamming the door, as they all do. And I said to him, if you slam that door once more, it's coming off, and it's staying off for a month. Anyway, sure enough, he slammed the door. Right, I said, right, that's it. So I said, the door's coming off. I said, go to the garage and get a screwdriver and you take that door off. He says, no, I won't do it. It went on for hours. I said, you will. You go and get a screwdriver. You're taking that door off. Right, eventually, went and got a screwdriver, took the door off, put the door in the garage. We kept it off for a month. Now, I've got to tell you, it was as painful for Daniel and I as it was for Declan, because it was when we were living in America. And as you know, in Florida, all the houses are on one floor. They don't have 2-story houses because of the air conditioning, right? And they have a lot of ground, so everything's on one floor. So literally, his bedroom, the door was off. We could hear him and, all his grumpy, whatever. Anyway, month was up, door went back on. And I said to him, right, I hope you've learned that lesson, Declan, because that door slams once more, it's coming off again. So this particular day, we're having a big in the house, as teenagers and mums do. Daniel's always been a really good stepdad. He's never got involved, and I've never wanted him to get involved. Anyway, and all of that. And Declan storms off, right, and he slams the door. And the next minute, the door opens and he says, I'm going to the garage to get the screwdriver. So there we are. Now, so I can see what you're saying, Declan, there. He had to do it because no one in the house can, and it's still the same today. It's true.
That is
true.
true.
He does our little DIY jobs for us. Anyway.
And Declan, apologies. I knew that could potentially take us on a trajectory that could lead us down a strange path. So let's just bring it back to this series we're on, Debbie. I think it's been a great start. I'm looking at the time. There is no other questions, but I do know you have something else to share with everyone before we part ways this morning. So I'm going to leave that to you to
it's my share closing, with the group. My closing moment.
It is your closing moments indeed, yes. Okay. Unless there is anyone that has any questions out there that hasn't come up, there's been some comments, there's some laughing, and which has been fantastic. But if there's any other comments just before we go, please put them in. But if not, Debbie, please share with us what you have.
Okay. So just the other day, somebody sent me a picture, a blast from the past. That she'd found. Actually, I've had a few people that have been having a sort out, and they've sent pictures and whatever, and that's lovely. It's so nice. She sent me this picture of me and her and another friend of ours. Here it is, and this is about. Oh God, this must be 35, 36 years ago. Look at our hair. We've all got the same hair. And when I saw it, I said to Daniel, I've got to show everybody this, because I tell the story, don't I, of Lady Diana. Everybody had highlights and a layered haircut. So this was the period of time when everyone had, look, the colour's the same, the hair's the same. But when I showed Daniel said, oh my God, he said, Don Bewley said people with a round face shouldn't have round hairstyle. I said, yeah, look, it's 3 rounds. It's a round face, curly, so it's round, and the cut is round. It's a round on a round on a round. I mean, oh God. I said, I've got to share that with everybody today. Anyway, you might recognise who shared it with me. The one on the right there is Carol Shell. I don't know if she's on here today. Yeah, it's Carol. See, she hadn't changed. I look at Carol, I think she's not changed. But and when I said that, Carol said, oh, don't say that. I've not even, you mean I've not changed my hair? So anyway, I did think that was funny, that we'd all got the same colour, the same style. So we're going to leave you with that today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have. We're gonna next couple of weeks, let's keep it light, let's keep it fun. We're gonna have some great people here, and have a great weekend, everybody. It's going to be beautifully sunny this weekend, so get outside, have some fun, keep in touch if there's anything you need. We're here for you. And yeah, love to you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And see you on Monday with Gianni with the next Defining Moments series. Thank you very much.